Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Hayya ala salah. Hayya ala salah. Hayya ala falah. Hayya ala falah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فلا تطيع الكافرين وجاهدهم به جهادا كبيرا. This is chapter 25, verse 52. So obey not the disbelievers and strive against them, a mighty striving with it. It meaning the Holy Quran. Sadaqallahu al-Aliyyul Azim. And the title of today's khutbah is Jihad is our duty. Now, if you read The Guardian, on 28th of September, it printed an article which said, prejudice against Muslims exists in every corner of Europe. Not only do we collectively devalue and discriminate against Europeans who follow Islam, but the incidents of violence against Muslims is increasing. And talking about Germany and Poland, in both countries, anti-Muslim prejudice prepared fertile ground for racist violence. According to German police statistics, the number of crimes classified as Islamophobia rose by 4.4% to 950 offenses in 2019. Repeated or foiled attacks on refugee centers and mosques are becoming a serious danger to Germany's national security. And then 2 days later, on 30th of September, The Guardian printed an article which said, almost half of the Conservative Party members believe Islam a threat to British way of life. According to a poll which has reignited concerns over Islamophobia within Britain's ruling party, it found that more than 1/3 of card-carrying Tories believe that Islamist terror attacks reflected a widespread hostility to Britain among the Muslim community, and nearly 6 in 10 thought there are no-go areas in Britain where Sharia law dominates and non-Muslims cannot enter. Attitudes hardened among those who had backed Boris Johnson in the 2019 leadership election. 44% of them believed that Islamist terror reflected widespread hostility of British Muslims, and 2/3 of whom believed that there were no-go areas. This is Guardian, 30th of September. This is very interesting because if you actually look at statistics, then according to FBI statistics, of all terrorist attacks on the US soil from 1980 to 2005, guess how many were committed by Muslims? Any guesses? No, percentage. Oh,
50,
50%, 60%,
50, 30.
6%. According to a study from the Combating Terrorism Center at the US Military Academy, since 2011, politically motivated attacks by Muslim Americans killed 33 people, while terrorist attacks by white supremacists and other right-wing extremists killed 200 people, 9 times as many. According to a report by the Triangle Center on Terrorism and Homeland Security, 66 Americans were killed in mass shootings by non-Muslims in 2012 alone. Twice as many fatalities as from Muslim American terrorism in all 11 years since 9/11. What does that show us? That shows us that we as Muslims have failed. We have failed to put to people what Islam and the Holy Quran are really about. This time is very similar to the time of the Holy Prophet Muhammad at Makkah, when he announced that he had brought God's revelation. Muslims were physically attacked, like in these reports, they're being physically attacked, but most of the attacks on Islam were through speeches, etc. That was the form, that was the media. People would gather in the Kaaba and talk and make speeches against the Holy Prophet Muhammad. And the same thing is happening, but instead of it taking place in one specific place through the use of internet and newspapers and so on, this happens throughout the world. But there are two sad things. One, we provide the material for this. And number two, we don't do anything to combat the wrong impression and understanding of Islam amongst Muslims and non-Muslims. Muslims themselves do not understand what the Holy Quran is teaching. This is why I recited this verse which says, so obey not the disbelievers, but struggle against them. A mighty striving with the Holy Quran to show people what its real teachings are. But we can't do that unless we ourselves understand what Islam teaches. This is exactly the same as the time 150 years ago when Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad started his mission. And when he said that the age is beginning when the name Ahmad of the Holy Prophet Muhammad will be manifested again, and that is that the beauty of Islam will become apparent to the world through preaching and teaching and discussion. And it is sad that Muslims misunderstand Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad's words as well. Let's take this idea of jihad. Jihad is needed to defend Islam. And that immediately means that people, Muslims and non-Muslims, Muslims included, lead to the conclusion that we should take a gun or a sword and go and attack people and kill them. But if you look at the Holy Prophet's instructions, he was asked by a woman, how can I conduct jihad? And he said to her, going to pilgrimage, going to Hajj is your jihad. Because of the difficulties and the trials that people faced in those days in going to Mecca, even from Medina, which is just a few hundred miles away. That if a woman if a woman struggled and strived to make that Hajj. Here is one hadith. People talk about hadith, but here is one that people always forget. A man asked, what is the best jihad? And the Holy Prophet said, the best jihad is to look after your parents when they're old. And even when Muslims were going out to give battle because they were under attack at the Holy Prophet's time, he saw a man and he said, what are you doing here? And he said, I want to join the army. And I want to go and fight those who are attacking us. I want to take part in this jihad. And the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, your mother is old. Your jihad is to care for your mother. But we Muslims and non-Muslims alike always associate jihad with fighting and killing. At another time, the Holy Prophet was asked, what is the greatest jihad? And he said, the greatest jihad is to speak up. Is to speak up and say the truth to the face of a tyrannical ruler, to the face of an oppressor. That is the greatest jihad. Another time, the Holy Prophet Muhammad was coming back from a battle. And there's a lot of argument about this hadith, whether it is weak or strong, etc., because in the chain of narrators, one person is regarded as being not very reliable. But anyway, coming back from a battle, the Holy Prophet Muhammad said, the minor jihad is over, and we now return to the major jihad, to the main jihad. And his companion said, O Prophet of Allah, if this was minor jihad that we are returning from, what is the major jihad? What is the main struggle? What is the main striving that we are returning to? And the Holy Prophet said, to subdue your own ego. That is the main struggle. But are these new ideas that we have thought up to justify the concept of jihad? Let's look at what Imam Raghib, who was a scholar in the 5th century of Islam, said, when Muslims were ruling large parts of North Africa and other places. He said, jihad is of 3 types: striving against the apparent enemy, striving against the devil, and striving against your own ego to subdue it. All 3 types are included in the words of Allah, and strive hard in God's path with all the striving that is due to Him. This is a verse in the Holy Quran in chapter 22. I think it's verse 77 or 78. Where God says, strive in Allah's way as you should. And Imam Raghib, in 5th century, 5th Islamic century, he says this. And at that time, Muslim armies were fighting in many countries. Today's, and a few centuries on, a similar abstract was offered by Ibn al-Qayyim. Jihad is of 4 types, he said. Number 1, against your own ego. Number 2, against the devil. Number 3, against the disbelievers. Number 4, against the hypocrites. But even here, he doesn't say fighting. Jihad has to be relevant to the attack, the form of attack, and jihad has to be relevant to the time and its needs. If people are accusing Islam of being a violent religion, and rather than answer them calmly and peacefully, you take a sword and you attack them, what have you just done? Any answers?
Right.
Yes, you've proven them right. Look, we told you Islam is an intolerant religion. We criticized it, and look, they've come and attacked it. This is what we do time and over again. All the attempts recently to create Islamic Khilafat and Islamic government and so on, if you look at them, those who attempted such things were extremely intolerant and violent and brutal, even towards Muslims, but certainly towards non-Muslims. And people hold this up. People hold this up as an example to show, look, they are saying we are establishing an Islamic government, and they are locking women up in their homes. They are saying girls can't go to school or college. They are saying that a girl has no right to say whom she wants to marry or to go out and work. Even to the extent that one such group, who had a large number of non-Muslims living under them, they were actually selling young girls in markets. It is a very small percentage of the Muslim population or Muslim world that does it. But these are the incidents that get highlighted. You never hear or read a headline, BBC never comes on and says, congratulations, there were no murders in Swindon today. Everything was peaceful. No one went through red traffic lights. No one punched someone else in the face. But if there was a murder, if there were muggings, they'd be all over the television and the newspapers. Because this is what sells newspapers. Bad news, not good news. Have you ever heard any news broadcast saying, oh, Shahid and his next door neighbor, who's the vicar of the local church, live together quite peacefully. Sometimes when a delivery comes and Shahid is not home, the vicar accepts the delivery. And then when he sees Shahid's car, he goes and says, knocks on the door and says, this arrived for you in your absence. But if the delivery guy was to go to the vicar, and the vicar was to punch him in the face and go, that Muslim, that infidel next door, why should I take his delivery? It'd be all over the newspapers. And this is what we do. We fail to recognize that the war now is the war of hearts and minds. It's a war of literature. It's a war of intellect. It's a war for the souls of the people. But we singularly failed to realize that. We have failed to adapt our weapons so that we can take part in the Jihad at this time. Jihad now is to present yourself as model human beings and say to people, if you truly follow Islam, if you truly follow the Quran, if you truly follow the Holy Prophet Muhammad, then you too will become like this. You too will be concerned about the poor and the oppressed and the orphans. You too will be concerned that people should have their human rights. Rather than suppressing people, you grant them the right to think freely and to espouse whatever they are saying freely. Unfortunately, we are losing that war. This is why it is our century. This is why this is our time. I was reading the transcript of a press release by CARE, which is an organization called the Council for American Islamic Relations or something like that. And it was about jihad. And it was like reading one of Hazrat Mirza Sahib's articles or books on jihad. This is why I say this is our century. Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad said, Islam will only be successful if now you return to the example of the Holy Prophet Muhammad at Makkah and see how he behaved and what he did at that time to counter intolerance, to counter persecution, and many other things that the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions radiyallahu ta'ala anhum suffered at that time. Our duty as Ahmadis is double. We have to convince our brother Muslims of these things. And as I said to you, this isn't something that we concocted. The meaning of jihad I read out from two people, Raghib, a noted scholar, an accepted authority, and another person. But somewhere along the line, it was all distorted. Even at the shortly after the Holy Prophet's time, a Muslim army was going out, and one man said to a companion of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallam, you used to join every single campaign, but now we don't see you going with the army. And the companion replied, we used to fight to establish God's authority on land. You fight simply to grab more land. And that is not jihad. But somewhere along the line, that message was lost and resurrected by Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Sahib. And it is our duty to tell Muslims about the real meaning, the real teaching of Islam, and who brought that teaching to this world. So we'll be doubly answerable if we fail to do these things. We don't have to be apologetic. We don't have to feel inferior. We don't have to feel embarrassed. Someone asked me, do you apologize for this killing in France some years ago? And I said, why? Did I do the killing? I said, do you apologize for the way the white people treated the black people in South Africa? And he said, why should I? I didn't do it. And I said, well, why should I? I didn't do it. I don't have to apologize. So be confident, but also make sure that when people criticize Islam, you deal with them patiently and with logic and with knowledge. بارك الله لنا ولكم في القرآن العظيم ونفعنا وإياكم بالآيات والذكر الحكيم إنه تعالى جواد كريم ملك بر رحيم. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم انصر من نصر دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم واجعلنا منه واخذل من خذل دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا تجعلنا منهم عباد الله رحمكم الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. Hayya ala salah, hayya ala falah. Qad qamatis salah, qad qamatis salah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah.
Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin Ar-Rahmanir Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده.
ربنا ولك الحمد.
الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. أستغفر الله. أستغفر الله. اللهم إنك I apologize for the late start today. Our radio broadcasting software collapsed and we were trying to bring it up unsuccessfully, unfortunately. So you won't find today's khutbah on our radio station. So apologies for that. Thank you very much for joining us. Our next broadcast is on Sunday, and at 9 a.m. it is Urdu from 9 to 9:30, and from 9:30 to 10 it is English. We are also restarting our French broadcasts, which had stopped a while ago for various reasons. So inshallah, in the next week or two, we'll start those as well. In the meantime, until we meet again, I pray that Allah keeps all of you safe and sound and free from harm. Assalamu alaikum, Khuda Hafiz. Goodbye.